What do you think happens to our consciousness when we die? Does it vanish with the brain, or does it go somewhere else? What if I told you that science is starting to show that your memories, your personality, maybe even your soul, might not live only in the brain? There are real medical cases, backed by hard data, suggesting that consciousness might show up in donated organs, and even keep going when the brain has completely shut down. Now, if true, this changes pretty much everything we thought we knew about who and what we are. So where is consciousness, and where does it go? Let's dive in. Okay, first let me tell you a story. Jerry was only 16 months old when he tragically drowned. His heart was transplanted into Carter, a 7-month-old baby with heart disease. Years later, Jerry's mom met Carter, and she couldn't believe what she saw. She said, "Carter is 6, but he was talking Jerry's baby talk, playing with my nose, just like Jerry did." And Carter's mother was stunned too. She said, quote, "He's normally so shy, but he just walked right up to her, like he was running back to me when he was a baby." Then he whispered to Jerry's mom, "It's okay, Mama." And I broke down. He called her Mother. And it didn't stop there. One day in church, Carter noticed Jerry's dad across the room, and they had never met before. Even though he was with a group of people, Carter ran up to him directly, climbed into his lap, and said, "Daddy." How could he have known? Can an organ like the heart maybe carry memories, personality traits, and perhaps even a part of someone's soul? Paul Pearsall, a clinical neuropsychologist, and his colleagues first documented Jerry and Carter's case. They studied over 74 organ transplants across a decade, and again, they found stories like this. Organ recipients took on traits of their donors, their likes, their dislikes, and even their quirks. To give you another example, there's a wild story about Danielle, an 18-year-old who, after she had a heart transplant, suddenly had this overwhelming urge to play the guitar, the exact instrument her donor loved to play. And even more eerie, the donor's father reported how, after his son's death, he found poetry and music in his room. And the father noted, quote, "One of them has left us shaken emotionally and spiritually." It spoke of his seeing his own sudden death. He was a musician too, and we found a song he titled, "Danny, My Heart Is Yours." The words are about how my son felt he was destined to die and give his heart to someone. Who would have known that just a couple of years later, his heart really would be in Danielle? A coincidence, maybe. And then there's a case of Claire Sylvia. She was a health nut and a dancer. After her organ transplant, she couldn't stop craving chicken nuggets. Later, she finds out that, that was her donor's favorite food. Now, one story might be a coincidence, but dozens, hundreds, when you start looking at the numbers, it starts to look like a pattern. A 2024 study found something pretty incredible. While many organ recipients report changes, heart transplant recipients were nearly twice as likely to experience 4 or more major personality shifts. It really does seem like there's something special about the heart. These personality shifts include things like changes in watching sporting activities, changes in temperament, and like we saw, food preferences. That same study found that up to 89% of all organ recipients, including kidney, lung, or liver transplants, reported some kind of personality change after their surgery. Now, I should mention here that the authors didn't correlate these changes to their donor's traits, but the changes after the transplant were real nonetheless. Just think about that for a second. This isn't a rare or bizarre side effect. It's a widespread documented phenomenon. The overwhelming majority of people who have organ transplants experience personality changes. But why and how? So how in the world could someone's organ change your personality? Well, some say it's only a phenomenon caused by immunosuppressants, pain medication, or maybe even confirmation bias, a sort of self-fulfilling prophecy. Maybe. Others think there may be other explanations. Dr. Michael Lister from the University of Colorado School of Medicine has a theory. It's called cellular memory. The idea is that your memories and traits aren't only in your brain. They might be distributed throughout your entire body, stored in the very cells of your organs. He outlines 6 possible ways memories could be stored in cells: through DNA, RNA, epigenetics, proteins, heart nerves, and even electromagnetic energy. And here's the fascinating part. The heart has its own mini nervous system, often called the heart brain. It uses the same neurotransmitters as the brain. It learns and it adapts. And remember that according to the data, heart transplants show the highest likelihood of personality changes. And even traditional Chinese medicine, going back thousands of years, says that the heart governs the mind and the spirit. So maybe the idea that the heart carries pieces of consciousness isn't too far-fetched. Okay, so if you think storing memories in a heart is mind-blowing, just hold on, because let's see how far this can go. What happens when both the heart and the brain stop working altogether? Can consciousness still exist? This is where we meet Palm Reynolds. She had a giant brain aneurysm. To save her, doctors put her into something called hypothermic cardiac arrest, which is basically a fancy way of saying that they cooled her body down to 60 degrees, they drained all the blood from her brain, and then forcibly stopped her heart. It sounds gnarly because it is. It's also called a controlled state of death. Now, I want to be really clear about what that means. Her heart was not beating. There was no heartbeat. Her EEG was totally flat. No brainwaves. Even her brainstem, the most primitive part of the brain, showed 0 activity. By every medical definition, she was completely unconscious. But she wasn't. She later said she actually felt herself float out of the body. In her own words, it felt like she was sitting on the surgeon's shoulder, watching the entire operation happen right below her. Now, here is where things get even more weirdly specific. She described the unique shape of the bone saw they used on her skull. She also repeated word for word casual conversations between the doctors and the nurses. She even knew that they were playing the song Hotel California in the operating room. The thing is, she had earplugs to guarantee her brain couldn't process sound. And you might be thinking that, oh yeah, sure, she can just say these things. And you're right. As the medical report states, quote, "We should be cautious, nevertheless, of accepting this explanation unless the claim of extrasensory perception can be independently corroborated and verified." The unique thing with her case is that it was verified. The medical staff promptly confirmed every detail she reported. Now, Pam's story is literally the golden standard for sure, but is it just a 1 in a million fluke? Not even close. There's another story reported in The Lancet, one of the world's top clinical journals. The report recounts how a man in the Netherlands had a cardiac arrest. During resuscitation, a nurse removed his dentures and placed them in a cart drawer. A week later, when he regained consciousness, he pointed to that nurse and said, "Oh, that nurse knows where my dentures are." Then he said that the dentures were put into a sliding drawer underneath the cart. And he was right. These so-called near-death experiences, or NDEs, have been systematically studied by researchers, and the accuracy of what people report is just fascinating. Just look at this data from Dr. Janice Holden. She interviewed 93 people who had these experiences, and then had their out-of-body observations checked by the actual hospital staff who were there. Over 92% of what they saw and heard was completely accurate. Another survey with more than 600 cases found that when patients described things they could verify, they were correct almost 98% of the time. Now, that's a level of consistency that science cannot ignore. We're not talking about fuzzy memories or vague statements like "I saw a light." We're talking about real-world, verifiable observations being made by a consciousness that, according to everything we think we know, shouldn't even exist at that moment. So what does it all mean? Let's put it all together. We have transplant patients inheriting their donors' habits, near-death patients seeing and hearing things they shouldn't. It all points to the idea that maybe the brain doesn't generate consciousness. Maybe it's more like a radio, tuning into something that's already there. Scientists call this a non-local view of mind. In this model, consciousness might be like a fundamental part of the universe, like gravity. And I spoke with a physiologist, Dr. Peter Whaling, and he told me this metaphor. Consciousness might be like a rainbow. It's undeniably real. You can see it. It follows rules, but you can't exactly hold it in your hand. It's something that emerges from a much deeper reality. And all of this brings us right to the ultimate question we should ask. If our memories can live inside a heart, if our awareness can continue without a functioning brain, then what are we really? The data seems to suggest we are so much more than just biological machines. And if consciousness doesn't go to the grave, maybe we are, in some sense, eternal? Now, I want to hear from you. Have you, or has anyone you know, ever had an experience that science just can't explain? Let us know. Share your story in the comments below. And if you want to keep exploring questions this big, hit subscribe. Thanks for tuning in, and see you next time.